This is a Dynam Hawksky. It has 4 channels, and it is a very popular beginner airplane for people who are learning to fly all on their own. And what I'm going to do is I am going to outfit this with a gyro. The gyro is going to be set up to stabilize the ailerons so that when you're flying in a windy condition, it will have an effect where normally when you're flying in windy conditions, you'll see the ailerons will kind of, roll to one side as the wind gusts change and so forth. Sometimes it also makes it go kind of up and down. We're not going to affect that. But the one thing that annoys a lot of people is they're flying and all of a sudden the airplane jumps to one side, and especially for beginners it might disorient them, or if they're trying to land, it's coming in and get a gust from the side and it rolls and then starts to hit the runway or something like that and causes it to flip or cartwheel. So I'm going to hook up a simple gyro, a rate gyro, to the ailerons to help stabilize it in the wind. The target location for the gyro is going to be inside here in the cockpit, inside the fuse. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little block of foam so that I can mount the gyro properly on the inside. This particular Easy Hawk comes with a 4-channel radio. This is the 72 megahertz. They just came out with a 2.4 gigahertz, but this has a regular 4-channel radio with it. So in order to show how this is done with the stock radio, I'm going to use this Esky, see if I can get a good shot of it here, this Esky 704 gyro. Okay, this is not the same thing as a 704A or a 704B, which will look different. This is a regular plain Jane Esky 704 rate only gyro. But first what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mount so that this, the way this operates is you're going to mount it so that the axis is like this. Okay, this is the aileron axis. Normally on a helicopter it's mounted like this, okay, to handle the yaw. Alright, so I'm going to mount it just like this. Okay, so I want this to be mounted, get a view here, so that the back face of this is going to be perpendicular to the aileron axis. So the first thing I did was I took a piece of spare foam and I cut out a little cube here, and so this is going to get mounted inside. It's going to get epoxied in there, and the important part is that you start with pick 2 sides that are 90 degrees to each other, because one side is going to be flat and epoxied on the bottom, and the other side I'm going to make a little plywood piece so that I can double stick foam this together. I don't like to double stick foam onto styrofoam, so I'm going to make a small little square there, and I'm going to epoxy a little piece of light ply to that. So I've got my little block of styrofoam and a little piece of plywood on it, and I've picked a edge, so I've got this side and this side where the plywood is, and it's as close to 90 degrees as I think I can visually get it. That's my little block of foam, and the next thing I'm going to do is I've got this Scotch indoor-outdoor mounting tape. This stuff works really well, and when I say works well is that it holds the gyro to the little block of foam. So I've got a little square here that I've cut out, okay, and this I'm going to mount onto there. I got it mounted, and this uses what's called pressure sensitive adhesive. Just touching it to it doesn't make it really seal well. You have to push and rub it on. Okay, so number one, you got to make sure that the epoxy has cured. So if it's 15-minute epoxy, let it cure for an hour, something like that. And you put the double foam tape on there, and the next thing you're going to do is, well, you can put the gyro on now, but typically what I like to do is I like to mount the foam in there and then mount the gyro on it after that, and that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to epoxy this on there and then come back. So I've got it epoxied inside the fuselage, and the important thing is to make sure that the front edge there is straight, okay, with where the ailerons are going to be. Okay, you don't want to make it you don't want to make it crooked, okay, because then it's going to not really sense the aileron roll as well, and it'll sense a little bit of elevator in. Okay, so I've let the little blocks epoxy cure overnight, so it's nice and hard, and I've removed the release paper. So I'm going to take the Esky gyro, and I am going to push it in here. Okay. Alright. And what I've found is that when I'm using that 3M indoor-outdoor tape, once I stick it on, as long as you let it stick on there and give it a little push, it pretty much does not come off. The other thing is make sure that your surface that you're adhering to is nice and clean, no dust, extra dirt or anything. So since I'm putting this on the ailerons, I am going to unplug the existing channel 1 connector, okay, and I am going to plug in the gyro where that was. Looks like my receiver needs to get held down a little bit better. I'll take care of that some other time here. And then the aileron, okay, then the aileron Y connector, which is right here, I am going to plug into this, making sure I got my, in this case, I got brown on top and black over there. Okay, so now it is all wired up. I'm just going to tuck this wires in there to get it out of the way. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and check to make sure that the gyro its reversal setting is set correctly. And one thing I forgot to mention is make sure that you've got a screwdriver that will fit into the dial to set the gain on the gyro, and that it's small enough to fit into the area that you've got there before you go ahead and mount it. It'll be pretty awkward if you can't get a screwdriver in there, but what I've done is I've set this gain dial fully clockwise, okay, and that gives me a 100% gain. You're not going to fly it like that, but that's good for allowing you to do a polarity test on the gyro. So one thing I'm going to show you is the initialization of the gyro. Okay, there's a little red light, and when you first plug it in, it's going to flicker, and after you plug it in, you want to keep the airplane still. Okay. Okay, it's now gone solid. It can take a while. You'll also hear the gyro has made the aileron servo center. And one thing that's very important is that if you don't have the trim tab of the aileron centered when you initialize it, it is not going to initialize and it'll end up blinking. So one important aspect is to make sure that you mechanically center your ailerons. So if you're flying it and you have to have full trim tab over in order to fly it, when you're done, what you want to do is take off again after mechanically changing the adjustments. Okay, mechanically changing the adjustments of the ailerons so that you can fly it with that trim tab centered. Otherwise, when you initialize the gyro, it's not going to work properly. Okay, so let me show you what it looks like if I set the trim tabs. Okay, I've got the trim tab on the aileron all the way over, and this is what it's going to look like if you try to initialize your gyro. Okay, the light's flickering, flickering. Okay, see how the light's blinking? That means it either can't get a signal from the receiver, or the trim tab is not centered. Okay, so when that light is flashing, okay, it means that the gyro is not initialized properly. So let's try that again. Okay, I've got it centered. I'm going to plug it in again. Light's flickering. I'm trying to keep this airplane as still as possible while it's flickering. You'll even see this. You'll see the aileron servos move. Okay, that means it's initialized. The light is solid. It's solid red. Now it's initialized. So I'm going to do an aileron control surface test. So I'm going to pick up this airplane, okay, and what I typically do is I look at just one of the aileron wings and I lift it up, okay. As you're lifting it up, the aileron surface should also move up, okay. That's its compensation, right? So I'm lifting up and the aileron is actually moving down, okay. Let's make sure that you can see that again. I'm going to lift up that wing and the aileron's going down. If I go down, it's supposed to also go down, but you can see as I'm moving that wing down, that side of that wing down, okay, I'm going down, but it's moving up. That's wrong. So what I'm going to do is, in here, I've got a reverse switch, and I'm going to reverse it, okay, and it actually does change its programming right away, but it's a good idea to go ahead and reinitialize it. But let me show you now. When I lift that wing, the aileron goes up. Now I'm not lifting the whole airplane up, I'm actually rotating it, okay. So once again, you can see as I'm rotating, and that the wing that's going up, the aileron should move up as you're going. Of course, when you go back down, it goes down. So up, down. That's the compensation. So I know that the polarity is correct. Now I can adjust that gain, okay, back down to where I'm going to fly it initially. Now I've got the gain set down to about 30%, and that's where most of my rate gyros end up being, unless I have really good fast-acting digital servos. If you have a fast-acting digital servo, very tight mechanics, then you can usually get the gain a little bit higher than that, depending upon your conditions, the plane, and so forth. But around 30% over on the dial from counterclockwise. So I moved that dial fully counterclockwise, and then I turned it about 30%, and here's about how much movement I got now. Okay, so it's harder to notice, okay, but you can see that when I rotate the wing that's going up, the aileron does move up. Okay, and whenever I fly an airplane with a gyro, I have to make sure that I'm letting that gyro initialize, and I always do a control surface test to make sure it's responding in the right direction. And then also, you know, before any flight, you want to, you know, move your stick right. Does the right aileron move up, left, so forth? You know, same thing with the rudder. Okay, do that before every flight. Sometimes I end up doing it twice. So this airplane is ready to go, and we're going to give it a shot, and we're going to fly this. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and fly it when the winds are somewhat calm, just to make sure it's okay. Fly it in good conditions. You're not flying around a bunch of people. You're not flying when it's busy. I sometimes, when I got hand launchers, I just toss it over the weeds. But this should be okay, and that's how to set up the rate gyro, the Esky 704, in this Dynam Hawksky. Oh, one more thing is I did get this Esky gyro from xheli.com. I got it about a year ago for another helicopter. It's been sitting around, so I said, hey, I got this Dynam Hawksky. My kids like to fly it some. I like to train them on it. And this will help me allow them to fly in a little bit more wind than this normally can handle.